Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing women's unique challenges in the tech industry. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to Jaime Gennaro. Jaime is an executive coach and business consultant who has a unique talent for helping people unlock their full potential. One of the things she says in this episode, knowing your worth isn't just about money. It's about valuing your time, your skills, and your experience. When you understand this, you can negotiate and advocate for yourself with confidence. And in this episode, Jaime will share her inspiring journey from growing up in an entrepreneurial family to creating her own consulting business. She'll discuss her practical tips on building confidence, understanding your value, and taking calculating risks to achieve your goals. Jaime says you don't need to overwork to prove your worth. It's about the value you provide and the results you deliver. This mindset shift can make a huge difference in your professional life, and I tend to agree with her. Jamie's practical advice and inspiring stories will leave you feeling empowered and ready to transform your career. So get comfortable and let's dive into this enlightening episode with Jaime Gennaro. Let's dive right in. Hi, Jaime. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure having you here. And I don't know, for those of you who see the video, you can see how different the weather is for both of us. Here is super hot.
Yes. And in the Netherlands, it feels like it's never hot. I mean, we do have the occasional hot day, but it's pretty often overcast and not that warm. So
Yeah.
it's rough on a California girl, that is for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to start maybe, Jaime, you can share with our audience a little bit about your background and eventually what led you to start your consulting business, Practica Consulting, and you help executive and entrepreneurs reach their full potential.
Yeah, great. So I am kind of an entrepreneur at heart. I think it was ingrained in me when I was young. My parents started a business when I was maybe 8, and that business was where I worked every summer after school. Yeah, I would always go and help out. And so I think like growing up in that kind of environment, I just saw what was possible. I mean, they literally launched it from zero and they grew it into like a multi-million-dollar business. They helped people stop smoking with homeopathic remedies in the 80s.
Wow.
So they were a little bit ahead of their time too. They also like had a kombucha mother on the counter. Like it just was kind of, I mean, I think I just grew up in this space where there was new thinking and a different kind of approach to what work meant. And also this desire to make an impact and do something helpful, right? Like especially in the 80s in the US, everybody was smoking. And so I think the fact that they were in a line of business that ended up being successful, that was also doing good, was something. And so I think I kind of went through my career. I worked in advertising. I worked in tech. I worked in the, center point of advertising and tech also. And I think what I realized too is I was working with a lot of big brands that I didn't necessarily think were doing amazing work in the world. And I was really in a space of like trying to get people to buy these products. And so I did that basically up until COVID, but I've started multiple businesses, like smaller businesses. And I think during COVID, what I realized when I got laid off from my job was a lot of people are struggling. A lot of people don't know how to just start finding creative ways to make money, that it might be easier than you think. I mean, I think the generation behind us and the generation behind them know that like you can make some money on YouTube, right? Or you can make some money in like Instagram posts. I mean, I think we all know it's out there, but it's not as easy for people as I feel like I've made it in my life, where if I moved someplace, I'd have to get creative about what I was going to do there. And so I
Yeah.
think now what I did during COVID was just put out basically a call. If you're out of work, if you're struggling, if you're not able to bring in income because of what happened, get in touch. I'll help you for free. I was on severance because I got laid off. And so I just started helping people, guiding them through the possibility. Like if you were to dream up a business and think about how you could earn some income right now, starting from zero, what could we do leveraging your skills, leveraging your talents, leveraging your network, and trying to build something without any overhead? And so I just started doing that for free for a while and then realized there's a very interesting space right now of what we do well, what we love, and what we might be able to provide to the world. It's like the Japanese ikigai.
Love
And
it. Yeah, I love Ikigai.
right. And I want to be able to help people kind of find that intersection, but not everybody has a business background. Not everybody has a marketing background, but people have amazing ideas. And I want to help them test and trial those ideas and see if they have legs before they commit, before they decide they're quitting their day job or they're going all in. Help them through that journey of like, let's just see what's possible before you decide it's impossible. So that's where I'm at now. And
This
it's
is
amazing.
incredible. And I can very much relate to what you said. First of all, it's incredible how the mindset is powerful, right? It's all about what we allow ourselves to think, and do. Like it starts with our mind. And I can very much relate to what you said because I grew up in a middle class family. My parents worked for each one of them for one employer their entire career.
Mm,
And obviously because that's where I grew up, I thought I like, well, I need to learn, go to college, get a degree, start working, and that's what I can do. Like I have a profession and that's what I can do. Even my parents were always kind of stressed when I switch jobs, or my siblings, like, why do we need to switch a job? Like you have a good steady job. Like that mindset is everything.
yes. Yes, 100%. And I think since we talk about women in leadership here on your show, that's something that I think is socialized. I think actually the title of your show is really interesting, like from a woman to a leader. And I think what's interesting is we are natural leaders, right? We are the head of household. Oftentimes we're the one managing things, we're the project managers of our families, we're natural leaders. But I feel like there's this socialization of like the way we grow up, or the what we see in the world, or the leaders we see, or how we think we're supposed to show up, that we're socialized into this idea that we can't do what we would like to do, that there are not as many opportunities for us, or that it's not realistic, which is kind of the messaging you were getting from your parents. Like, this is what it looks like. And over there is, we don't go there. Like, that's just not where we go. We stay here and it's comfortable and steady and safe. And I
Exactly.
think it's
Yeah.
really interesting to like, again, like I want to do it in a safe way. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I mean, my parents in a lot of ways started their business because they had to. I started my business because I had to. I got laid off. I needed a job. And so it's not coming from a place of like, there's this safety net. It's coming from a place of like, be safe, take intentional risk, not risk just because you're tired of your job and you want to make a change. Like dip your toe over there, but don't be afraid to go into that unknown territory that might be uncomfortable just because you haven't let yourself explore it. Like look at your background and then look at where you are now. You're doing something so unique and interesting and fulfilling for you, and using your skills and using your experience and using your background, but you're not in like a traditional work environment, which is amazing that you sort of broke out of that with your background.
Yes, and to some extent, I still do. Like, I think that employee mindset is so ingrained in me that I have to. I mean, it's a constant challenge that I have to face, right? It's a mindset thing because we all have setbacks. Nothing is like. I mean, I know people like sharing like their successes, but like being an entrepreneur and being like working for yourself is not easy. It's not always easy, and you have to really build the resiliency and work on your mind constantly.
Constantly. It's such a, especially when you're a solopreneur too, Or you're growing a business and you have a team, but you still don't have, stakeholders or a board of directors when you're really like the decision maker. You're right. Like it's hard and it's as much a personal journey as anything else because we all have different blocks. We all have different socialization. We all have different backgrounds and hurdles. And I have a lot of clients. I had this conversation with a client yesterday where they look at what other people are doing. They even look at other people in my programs and say, well, how come they're at that point? How come I'm not there? Like, I want to be there. I should be there. I'm this age. I have this background. Like, how come I'm not there yet? And it's because we all have our different hurdles and blocks and things that we have to work through. And the employee mindset is one of them. Also, like, I can't rest. I just have to grind and grind and grind until I'm like completely worn out. I think that's like an old kind of, an old model to working that we're still trying to break out of. But it's a different kind of path for sure. I mean, and I think leadership in general is a different path because you're deciding for yourself that you're going to go into discomfort to get somewhere new instead of just staying in your comfort zone and staying in that place where you never have to challenge yourself. You never have to poke your finger out, but I think also as people, you and I have also lived abroad. We've lived in places where we didn't grow up. And I think even that just cultural exchange is one of those discomforts, right? That we're like ready to challenge ourselves and try on something new. I think it's scary and hard. And also when you get to the other side of that hurdle, you get to the other side of that block, it's amazing. It's like, it doesn't even matter what's over there. Like, oh, it's money or it's success or it's whatever. It's like, I made it over that. Like, I feel amazing. Like, I just did that. I did that for myself. I just, dedicated myself to the process. And here I am. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. And I think that getting out of your comfort zone is so important for everyone. And even when I was an employee, I was not happy just staying put, and being too comfortable for too long was not good for me. So I think, like I always encourage everyone that I coach, like you have to really stretch yourself a little bit. But that has to come with some level of confidence that actually you can do it, right? We talked about mindset. So if I
Yes.
want to break free of like a limitation that I have, it could be limiting belief or something that I have never done. I have to be confident in myself that I can do that, and maybe I will fail several times and learn for that.
Yes.
So what do you think women can do in order to kind of help themselves gain that confidence in themselves?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think that the thing that I think, decide about confidence is that it looks a certain way, right? So we see leaders who have confidence and it looks a certain way. Maybe they're really outspoken or they're always the first to raise their hand or the first to give a presentation or they look a certain way. And I think what confidence really is knowing that no matter what happens, you have your own back. Like you are going to support yourself, whether you fall, whether you humiliate yourself, whether you have any range of emotions. It's like, I know I'll survive. I'm not like that humiliation or that fear or that shame is not going to kill me, but I have my own back. I'm going to support myself. I'm not going to just continually beat myself up. Like that's confidence. I know I'm going to fail. It's also knowing that like there is no such thing as perfection and I will fail. And what am I going to do when that happens? How am I going to support myself and be okay with that failure? That's what makes you feel okay about continuing to go on when those things happen. And you just build from there. So it's like, oh my God, this like really shameful thing happened to me. This thing really humiliated me. I can't believe I like showed up at a meeting and I made this big mistake. It's knowing that, but that's part of it. I'm okay. Like it sucks. I'm not saying like those things are easy or we have to face them or we make a mistake and then we have to talk about it and admit it and tell somebody that we made this mistake. That's the worst. But then it's just knowing like, but I'm going to back myself up and know that I'm still going to show up. I'm not going to let that break me. I'm still going to show up. And then it just comes out when you show up in a meeting. You're just like, "Hey, I'm ready to fail." Like, who wants to make me try to break, like, the energy that you start showing up in is so different. And again, it's not something that you need to get from the outside, or that you need to be this outspoken extrovert to be confident. It's just like, I believe that whatever happens to me, I'm just going to support myself through it. I'm not going to kick myself when I'm down. I have my own back, and I'm going to just figure out what the next thing is that I have to do. I'm willing to do that for myself.
I very much relate with what you said. I think that I see confidence as very much internal thing. So if you have confidence, then you're not over the top if someone gives you a compliment. Like someone said, "Hey, Jamie,
Mhm.
you really did a great job or did something very well." So you're not like overly ecstatic, like, "Oh my God," like it's the, And on the other side, you're not like crushed, completely crushed if someone gives you a critic.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Because again, it's that energy of whatever happens, happens, right? Good or bad. I'm just going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I believe in myself, and I believe what I'm doing enough to know that. And I think when you make a mistake or you fail and you have to tell someone, I mean, I think as an employee, that's the worst. Like, you have to tell your boss that you made a big mistake. That feeling of shame and humiliation is like where confidence comes from. That is, I'm going to face it. I'm going to do what I need to do to resolve it. I'm going to problem solve through this. And I'm not going to keep shaming myself, because that's not going to help the problem. But I'm going to know that there's some work I need to do. But if I keep shaming myself, I'll never get to the work, because I'm just too busy beating myself up. And I think it's the trying to get out of that beating yourself up loop that starts to breed confidence, because now you insert in that loop the work you need to do. So there's humility in that too. It's not that confidence means ego, or I'm better than anyone, or look at me, I have all this experience, I'm going to show you. It's not coming from that attitude. It's more that if I fall, if I fail, if I make a mistake, I'm just going to show up in my integrity. I'm going to do what I need to do to get through it, and not going to just keep beating myself up about it. And then again, it shows up even in your body, right? You just stand differently when you're not in constant shame or constant defeat. You stand up differently, and then that's where the confidence starts to show externally. People can see it. You walk into a room, you're not hiding. You're just like, I'm ready to fail. I'm ready to be in whatever discomfort is about to happen, or comfort, or something great happens. I'm ready for it all. But whatever happens, to your point, it's not gonna be enough to shake me in either direction. I'm grounded. I feel safe where I am. I believe in myself, and I'm just gonna stay grounded, and everything can kind of sway around me.
Absolutely. I mean, those are really powerful things. And I think humility is a power, to be honest. I mean, you mentioned humility. I think it's so powerful, and actually being confident and humble. Like, because the most confident people don't need to constantly show how good they are or talk in a certain way. They just, they just know.
Right. Right. Exactly. And it is, and I think it's contagious in that way also, where people start to see what confidence can look like. And it's not the ways we've seen it before, right? Where we thought confidence was overconfident and ego, and just bragging about what you've done or who you are, and making sure that your voice is the one that is the loudest and rises to the top. Like, this is what we thought confidence was for a long time. And I think it's contagious when you're like, oh, that person is just standing up straight. They're ready to talk when asked. They're not trying to push their ideas on anyone. They're just showing up. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I'd like to show up like that. That's the power of coaching, I think, too, is that you start to see different models. You start to show up in a different way. And it's really about how you show up and how you feel in that situation.
Absolutely. And I very much believe that you should be who you are. And that's why I started this season, Negotiate Like a Woman, because like you should be yourself. And I want to kind of talk about negotiations because this is like a topic that women feel even less comfortable with.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
I know that you work with a lot of business owners. Hopefully, some of them are women.
Yes. Most of them.
Most of them. Wonderful.
Yes.
So, what do you think some of the challenges that the women you work with, that they are business owners, face with regards to negotiating?
I think it's what I see the most are two things: not knowing their worth. And this is tied to that whole old employee mentality. It's like, oh, I put in a certain number of hours. Those hours are worth a certain amount of money. And then that equals what I can charge or what my value is. When what we really know is that, excuse me, we're all willing to pay a plumber. I think we've all heard this metaphor, to come to our house and spend 5 minutes tapping to find out where the problem is and then diagnosing it. And we're willing to pay a lot of money for those 5 minutes because we're paying for a quick diagnosis, expertise, somebody we trust, somebody we know that we're not going to have to bring in 5 people to misdiagnose. This person is the one. And so I think a lot of women have a hard time valuing their skills and experience if they don't tie it to an hourly wage. They start to feel like, well, but my client or whatever service or product I'm offering, oh, well, I can't possibly charge that because it's only going to take me 15 minutes. Well, yeah, it's only taking you 15 minutes because you have 20 years of experience. Whereas if you bring someone in who it's going to take them 2 hours, they're coming at it with a different perspective and they're not going to solve the problem as quickly as you are. So it's not about time anymore once we become more senior, experienced, knowledgeable people. So we just don't know or stand up for our worth and our value. So I think that's a negotiation factor a lot of times. And even just setting rates and costs for whatever service you might be providing, I think it stands in the way often. The second thing, which seems like common sense, is that they just don't, and this isn't just women, I think this is just business owners in general, they don't do the math. And so it's really, really like interesting to me when I go in and I help with initial strategy with a business. When they first hire me, we do a strategy audit. And we basically look at, what are you offering? How much are you charging? What are your goals? What is your kind of unique value proposition? We do this whole strategy session. What's really interesting is they don't know how much it costs them to do the work. They've never sat down and said, okay, well, to do this audit for a business, it would take me 20 hours. And how much do I, generally charge for my time? And then what's the extra time it's going to take me? And do I have to do research? They've never sat down and really mapped out how much time something takes them. And so it's hard for them to negotiate. They've sort of birthed a number out of nowhere, and then they can't stand up for that number because they haven't justified it. They haven't looked at it themselves. And what's so easy in negotiation is when you know it's going to cost you, let's say, 100 euros, and you're charging them 110, it's really easy to justify that number because you know that's how much it's going to cost you and you don't want to pay out of pocket. But a lot of times people just don't do the math first. So they don't go in with that power and that knowledge and that definitive reason for standing behind a number because they don't even know what that number is. So when someone pushes back or says, well, how about this number? They're just like, sure, any number sounds great because I don't even know what that number should be. So I'm just happy with any number. And I think that's really disempowering if you don't know that first starting point. And it's interesting how many people don't. And one of the things I do straight, like first engagement, is I give people basically this template of costing out your work. And just so that you can sit down and do that exercise yourself, so you know. And that way you know too if you're overcharging, which I think is equally important, that you need to know that you're sitting in a place where there's no resentment towards the number. There's no, I'm over servicing and I set a number that now I feel terrible about myself every time I engage with this client because I set a number that's way too low and now I'm full of resentment. You need to know what the number is for that reason, for being able to negotiate and stand in your power behind that number of what you know you're going to spend. I see a lot of women in business over servicing in service organizations. They over service their clients, and it could be an advertising agency, it could be a consulting business, it could be coaching. They over serve and they over give because they just don't know how much it costs them from the first, moment they engage with someone.
Yeah, I think that we also try to really, at least I can attest for myself, really important for me to keep the client happy because we want
Yes.
to satisfy the need to satisfy, like, may cause us to do way more than we should.
Yes. Yes. And I think that is also tied to this confidence piece, right? And knowing what our value is and standing in that value. Like, I don't need to work 40 hours to show my worth. I could work 1 hour and get paid what I used to get paid to do 40 hours of work because what I bring in that 1 hour is value. And I think we need to know that value, not just how much time it takes us, but also that, like, what I'm providing you is going to be transformative. We need to know that when we're selling a service to someone, we need to know that, like, what we offer is going to make a change for them. They have a pain point and we're here to like give them a solution to that pain point. And when we remove that pain, there's no price. There's no price to removing pain, right? If you're in the desert and someone is thirsty and dying and you provide them with water, there's almost no price to that, right? I mean, we don't want to, that example is bad because then it's like we get into this space of, well, should we always charge, right? Because we're giving, advice or service. But I think that this is something that we do as women too. We overgive, we're nurturing, we want to people please, we want to make people happy. And it's like, what if we didn't do that? What if? And that's a mindset piece. If we took that all the way to the end of the story, like, okay, so we don't do what would please them, whatever we think is going to please them, which we don't even know. We can't decide for them what's good or bad for them. But I think if we just took that all the way down the line, like, okay, so I charge them a certain amount, I don't overgive, I have this firm boundary, they don't like it, let's just play out the worst case scenario. Then they tell me what? They don't want to work with me anymore. And then what? And I think we always take it all the way to the end of the road where it's like, and then I got to move out of my house because I can't pay my rent. And then I have to move under a bridge. It's like, okay, maybe, but let's problem solve. That's the confidence piece. Like, let's problem solve every place where you think there might be an issue. And let's just look at it. And let's just think, okay, well, what could be a potential solution there? So they don't want to work with you anymore. So now what? So now you need to find another client who respects your boundaries, who understands your value. Is that a worst case scenario? Not really. Maybe you needed to lose that client to have a client that really understands why you're charging what you charge. Not that we want to overcharge, but we want to make sure we're charging what we're worth and standing up for that number because we know where it's coming from.
Sure, and we cannot keep everyone happy. Never. Not if you're an entrepreneur, and also when you're an employee. When I was managing people, like, you cannot keep everyone happy. Some people are not going to be happy with decisions you make. Some people are not going to be happy with the work you do. That's just the way the world goes.
Yes. Yes. And that's a mindset thing too, right? When we think that we influence other people's happiness, right? Like, that's a little bit egotistical too. Like, what you bring to the table, I can't really influence. I can, but you get to decide whether or not it's going to influence you or not, right? Like, nothing I serve up or give you or say or manage you around, you don't have to take any of it. You get to decide. So for us to say like they're happy or they're unhappy, or I made them happy or I made them unhappy, you're taking their power away. It's like, no, it's up to them if they're going to be happy about this or unhappy about this or neutral about this, or, standing in their integrity about it. And maybe it's not going to bother them at all. But we like to decide for people ahead of time, like, oh, I don't want to give, this client this news. It's going to rock them. They're going to hate it. And it's like, are they? Why do we think we know the answer to that? And why is it stopping us from doing what we need to do and negotiating to what we need in the project and what we think is going to be best for them? That's part of the negotiation too. Like, we're making a recommendation because we think this is also going to serve you. So it's just interesting when we decide ahead of time for people, when we get into a negotiation, like, oh, they're never going to say yes to this. I hear that all the time from clients. Like, well, I could offer this service for this price, but they're never going to say yes.
How do you know?
Really? How do you know? Like, try it on. Try it once, and then we'll know. And then we'll have some data. And then we can make some like real decisions. But if you decide ahead of time before you know, what are you doing for yourself, and what are you doing for them? How is that serving you, and how is it serving your potential client? It's not serving them to decide that they don't want it when maybe they do. You're not giving them a chance to make a decision.
Absolutely. And you mentioned like you should know your worth, and this is one thing that we should constantly work on, like knowing what we are worth. And what I like to do is I like to look at similar kind of coaches and see what they charge, just to get some
Yes.
market research and see, okay, what's out there. Because yeah, sometimes you don't know, and this is part of market research. Every company does it, right? I mean, when you decide on a price point, you need to know what's your market value.
Yes. Yeah. Are they going to be able to find the same value somewhere else, cheaper? Yeah, you need to know what the landscape looks like. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you need to know who is your client, because yeah, maybe someone will want to hire my services and they cannot afford it, but maybe they are not my ideal client.
Right. Or maybe you can provide them something that doesn't take as much time, right? I mean, I think if you really want to work with them, you don't offer the same thing for a lower price. You offer a different thing for a lower price. We can do that too, right? We can make those decisions. I really want to work with this client, but I can't give them this level of service for what they're willing to pay. I'm going to give them a different level of service for
Yeah,
what they're able to pay.
definitely. And I wanted to ask you, because you talked about the time versus value, right? Which is so important, right? Because we don't want to measure everything in time. Also, I think it's relevant both for like business world, like if you're an entrepreneur or if you're an employee, right? Because I cannot say how many times I heard people say, "But I worked so hard." Like, well, I'm happy that you work hard, but or maybe I'm not happy, but that's not what is most important. So how can
Right.
we work on disconnecting, kind of creating a disconnect between the time versus the value? So, and looking at
Yeah,
value first.
I love that. I mean, I think a lot of, what's important to a company. If you're an employee or you're working with a company from, as an external vendor, it's about the bottom line, period, right? It's about the results and the outcome and being able to show them the results. So it's not just that I'm going to promise you transformation, or I'm going to promise you sales, or I'm going to promise you leads, or whatever it is that you're offering as an employee or outside. They want to know that you can get them from A to D or Z or whatever that path is. They want to know that they're going to end up on the other side. So that's the value. It doesn't matter it does matter how much time it takes depending on what it is that you're offering, but it's not how much time it takes you. It's like, okay, this is a 2-week process. We're going to get you from A to D in 2 weeks, and here's where you're going to end up, period. That's where you're going to be. And that getting you there is worth 20,000. Right? So it's more about what's the outcome, what is the value to them of that outcome? So, for instance, I'm working with a client right now who's consulting in the DEI burnout space. So,
Mhm.
trying to change company culture and behavior. And what's important to the clients is that they can track that so that they're not doing something one off and then that's it. And then they don't see any long term change in the culture or with the leadership teams. It's just, oh, great, we did this workshop and nobody really cares about it. And it was an afternoon they had to take off of work and now they don't think about it again. So, really trying to create this long term change. And so, what's really important to the company is like, look, we're going to take you from here where your teams are arguing and they're not working together, and no amount of team building is going to help them, to taking them through our process where they're going to be working together, collaborative. Nobody's going to be quitting. Your cost of burnout is $20,000 per person over a year, and you have to manage 200 sick days, right? So we have some data. And we know that it's costing the business money. So we can tell them we're going to save you 100,000, right? We're going to get your people here. And here's how much we think that's worth to you, because the cost of hiring people and training them and recruiting them and burnout and resignations and all of that, that has a cost. And our cost is lower than that. And we're going to get you there. And here's how we're going to measure it. So I think it's always looking at that outcome first of like, what is it worth to you to get here? Like with my clients, it's a lot about like, you're in pain, you're in a job you hate, or you're disconnected from your work, or you're just barely surviving and just putting your head down, and there's pain and anguish and it sucks. And I'm going to take you to this place where you're in a thriving business and you feel safe and protected and you have recurring revenue and you are doing work that you love. What is that worth? Right? And in some spaces there's no amount of money. That is your life. Like that is a shift in your life. People are like, I am 100% committed to investing in that kind of change, right? So we have to calibrate the market. We have to calibrate what we think our value is within that, right? I don't want to overcharge. I think that's a problem in the coaching industry in general. I think there's a lot of overcharging. So I need to calibrate where my values are within that space, but I know what the value is to my clients. And that's the confidence too, because I know that trajectory. I know what it means to go through that journey. And I know what it means to go through that journey alone. So I know the value of a coach. So when I get into a sales call with someone, it's so easy for me to justify that number. Because I'm like, number one, the value is like immeasurable. I know the cost of not doing it,
Mhm.
what it's going to cost you over here, and like medical bills and, wellness things that you need to like ramp up, and relationships that are affected by all of this, right? I know the cost, and it's easy for me to justify this number because I've done my own math and I know where my value is, right? But that outcome piece is really important because my clients do not care how much time it takes. Like they know how much time it's going to take, like how long a program cycle is, but they don't know that I put in 10 hours here or 15 hours there, or maybe one, maybe none, right? Like that part, they're not tracking. They don't care about that. What they want is the outcome. If I'm not getting them to the outcome, they don't feel like they've seen the value. I think it's the same as an employee too. I mean, there
Exactly.
are employers that want you to sit there looking busy between 9 and 5 and like you're not allowed to leave. But I think that is starting to shift. I think with remote work, people are realizing it's more about when you're productive and how you're productive and what your outcomes are, rather than you sat at your desk looking busy for a certain amount of time.
That's definitely changing in many companies, and not all, but in many companies it does. I've seen that already, so that's beautiful. So before we end, I wanted to ask you, Jamie. I mean, what else have have you wanted to share that maybe I didn't ask?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think that there's this idea, I think we touched on it before, like there's this place that feels impossible to reach, right? And I think what I love about like goal setting and building confidence and moving into leadership positions is that if we set a big goal, it's not whether or not we reach it. It's that we're committed to doing the work to get there, because if we set the goal up here, even if we get here, we're still like in a different place than we were before. And that's where that confidence starts to get built, because it's like, I said I was going to do something. I'm going to commit myself to this process. I'm going to discipline myself to know what the hurdles are along the way, that if I'm going into a leadership position, I've never been there before, there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be times when I show up and maybe I didn't say what I wish I would have said, or I got angry and I shouldn't have, or I let my emotions get the best of me. There are going to be these moments. And I think it's just the idea that we're moving towards this place, this best version of ourselves, this more evolved version of ourselves. And whatever happens along the way, we're like up for it. And it's not about whether or not we get to that end point. It's that the journey along the way is going to teach us things and get us places where we wouldn't have been if we didn't commit to the journey. So I think sometimes people just get discouraged, like, oh, I don't think I could I've never been able to do anything like that before. Or, I just don't think I'll be able to get to that place. And it's like, it's not about that place. It's about what happens to you along the way when you're working towards something like that. That's worth it.
For sure. Completely agree with you. Wow. Thank you so much, Jaime. And tell our listeners how they can find more about you.
Yeah. So my website is Practica. So it's PRACTICA.consulting. No .com or anything. It's just Practica.consulting. And you can read more about what I do and some of the clients I've worked with. I also have a podcast. Hopefully you'll come on my podcast too. It's called Business for Humans. It's a lot of the same kind of topics that we're talking about here. It's a lot of tips for leaders and really trying to be more human in the way that we lead, more authentic, everything that you're talking about here too. So they can check that out as well.
Definitely. I'll put the links there. And thank you so much, Jaime, for being here today. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. It's been great.
Thank you so much for listening to my episode with Jaime. And before you go, I just wanted to share with you what's coming up next week. And in the episode next week, I'm going to talk with Claudia Bruce Quarterly, and she's a key account manager at Red Hat and also a true advocate for women in tech. And we are diving into negotiation, obviously. And we want to make a huge difference in your career and your life. So I hope that we're going to be able to deliver in that episode. Claudia is going to share some strategies that will help you understand your true worth, but also to confidently ask for what you deserve and to learn how to position yourself as the obvious choice, whatever that may be, right? I mean, for promotion or whatever you want. Handle those tough no moments and also avoid common pitfalls that leave money on the table. So if you ever felt like you're undervalued, if you struggle with confidence in negotiations, or you just want to take your career to the next level, I hope this episode will help you with some very practical advice that you can start using immediately. So stay tuned for the episode that is coming up next week. And if you never want to miss an episode, subscribe to my podcast. And I'm always happy to hear from you. What would you like me to talk about and which guests do you want me to bring? Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful day.